So let me begin by noting that we've got apologies this evening from Steve Grange, who is on leave, and also from Cree, one of our Neds, who is unwell. And we do wish her a speedy recovery. We'll go then to the meeting of the last minutes of the last meeting. Feels like a long time ago, on the 2nd of October, when we met in person at Fulbourn. And I'm just going to go through these minutes for accuracy in the first instance. So on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6. Claire, can you come?
Yes, please. Page 5, bottom of page 5, 1025/6C. I've just got I think that section just needs to be read over. It doesn't quite make sense, and I think it's to do with the punctuation. Just needs to be redone, I think.
All right, I'll let Martin have a look at that. Can I just please make sure if you're not speaking that you stay on mute, everybody. Back to page 6. Claire, could you mute yourself if that's okay? Oh, you have. Brilliant. Thank you. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. And then page 11. All okay? Fabulous. Thank you very much. And then there were no outstanding actions to carry forward into this meeting, which is always good to see. Thank you. We'll move then to my report, which I'm going to take as read. I will, Martin, do you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair, just as a formality, the other set of minutes that we were in with the audit paper, I am presuming nobody's got any comments on those. So I just want those to be missed, that was all.
All right, if anybody's got any comments on those papers, if they could give them to Martin. It's a short set of minutes. I think it's very much to the point. Thank you, Martin. The only thing I would note today, of course, is the Secretary of State has announced that there's going to be an independent review of mental health, ADHD and autism. It's an important piece of work. It's going to be carried out at some pace, considering what is in remit, that it is looking at children, young adults and adults. So it's all ages and covering, as I said, mental illness, it describes it as mental health, autism and ADHD, being carried out by an eminent psychologist with a 3 to 6 month timeline, with a view to, it says, tackling inequalities, persistent inequalities, thinking about better person-centered care and speedier access to services. So to do a meaningful piece of work at that scale in 3 to 6 months is undoubtedly ambitious. We will be making inputs to it, I'm absolutely certain. I wouldn't want to put words into Kathy's mouth, but I think one of the things we would want to make sure is that serious mental illness does not get lost in this, that volume should not be the determinant of where all the attention and the resources go, because serious mental illness is as significant for some as a cancer diagnosis, for example. So we need to be really, really alive to what goes on there if we possibly can be. And as I say, they will be out to consultation and asking for inputs, and we'll be very keen to make our voice heard on that. But without further ado, and I wanted to say that thank you for all the questions that were submitted in advance. And Stephen, who is here for Steve this evening, is going to be picking those up through the report that he's giving on Steve's behalf. So Stephen, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll take the report as read, and as Eileen said, there are a number of questions. So, and I'll obviously cover those off in a moment. If I can just draw out a couple of sort of key areas from the report, though. Resident doctors strike. Well, again, the report gives big thank you to those who obviously supported, took part, and very much sort of supported our sort of response to the resident doctors strike. You will all have read in the paper that we now have a second resident doctors strike before Christmas, between the 17th and the 22nd of December. And Kathy and medical colleagues supported by EPRR actually are already sort of stepping up the planning work. And we do think, given the time of year and given the sort of increase in sickness, that that planning work is going to be essential to make sure we've got the right cover in place going forwards for that period. And then the only other bit I would just want to draw out before I go into answering the sort of the questions was around just to say thank you very much to Kish, who was our interim chief finance officer, who came in at quite a difficult time for the organisation as we were going through building up our efficiency plan and sort of making sure we got the right governance structures in place. And Kish has just left us last week, and we welcome in Robert Toole as chief finance officer. And again, the paper gives you a bit more detail there as well. And then finally, before I go to the questions, staff survey, just to say thanks very much to everybody across the organisation, including obviously our colleagues here. We hit, as an organisation, we hit 46.5% response rate. It was fractionally lower than the national average, but for CPFT, it was an increase of just over 4% on last year. And overall, nationally, there's a view that there'll probably be a slightly reduced response rate. So actually, we may have just bucked the trend. But again, we will need to wait to actually get the formal sort of report back. And again, just to confirm, we don't get that back until early next year. It's late January, beginning of February when we get all the information back for the staff survey.
Can we just pause there, Stephen, see if anybody's got any questions for you at all on that, on those items?
Thanks, Eileen.
No. In which case, Stephen, back to you.
Lovely, thanks, Eileen. So we've had some questions in from the Council of Governors, and the first one basically is around the executive and how we sort of dealing with the amount of sort of national sort of directives coming out from the centre, and how does it feel? And I think that's a really, really good question, and slightly heartening actually. The Council of Governors is sort of recognising the challenge that we collectively face at the moment. So, it is a challenge. I think it's fair to say. There are many, many different competing demands, which I won't go through. But as we go through the Council of Governors tonight, you'll clearly pick up certain elements. But there are at least 12, 13, 14 different competing elements at the moment. And actually, in fact, even today, we're hearing of some additional sort of guidance coming up before Christmas around neighbourhoods and what constitutes neighbourhoods and neighbourhood development. And again, I've just pinged out to exec colleagues additional information on sort of contracting and sort of new forms of contracting as well. So even as we move up to Christmas, there is additional information coming down. And this very much aligns to the NHS long-term plan. And so, as you would expect, as a sort of an executive, we've established what we call our portfolio board, which draws all of this together, all the policies, the strategies, the plans into a sort of a single oversight group meeting. And then this is accompanied by deep dives. So where we're not sort of delivering against certain bits of policy, for example, we'll do a deep dive as an executive team. And that's very much supported by sort of a wider corporate structure as well. So basically what we've done is we've put in that governance structure to deal with this sort of this shower of additional information, asks, policies, etc. And again, I think that's really important. And we are strengthening our PMO as well in order to actually support this. And again, that's a piece of work in progress at the moment.
Okay, we'll just pause there. Any questions at all for Stephen in this blizzard of requirements that have been descending since September, really, haven't they, Stephen?
Yeah, at least September, Eileen, and it's more to come.
There's definitely more to come. All right, let's press on then.
So the next question was around who's been recruited to support the development of strategies. And so at Public Board last week, we had an excellent presentation from Dr. Kathy Walsh around the health equity strategy and the clinical strategies. And we had a brief update on the overarching trust strategy. And the question basically is saying, you know, has the organisation taken on any additional staff to actually do this work, and have we funded that? So basically, the trust hasn't taken anybody additional on to actually do that work. What we've been doing is sort of realigning sort of staff within the existing structures. We've done some work earlier on in the year, April actually, where we were looking at sort of executive portfolios and moving portfolios around. This has basically given us a greater opportunity around sort of matrix working and support. We have had some public health input, and again, Kathy can sort of answer that in a bit more detail, but certainly around the sort of the clinical and the health equity strategy, we had public health input, which is incredibly helpful. Catherine Falconer, for example. And then we've actually done some further work, as I said, around the PMO, strengthening that. And also we've been doing some work around the operational finance. And we have got a director of operational finance coming into role in early January as well, alongside, as I said earlier on, sort of, you know, we've had an interim CFO. We've now got another more permanent CFO who will be with us till at least next April, if not next June. So again, sort of positive, we've sort of taken steps to actually sort of deal with that, the strategy work. I think it's fair to say we will need to look at some portfolios in some areas. And Steve and I are talking about using some additional vacancies. So it's not new monies, it's not new posts as such, but using vacancies to support some additional roles around strategic and commercial. And that's a piece of work we're currently looking at the moment. But as I say, that's coming from existing vacancies.
Okay. Any of your exec colleagues want to add anything, or governors got any questions on that? Okay, Stephen, back to you.
So the next question then talks very briefly around sort of key strategies. As I said, we looked at 2 last week at Public Board, and we started talking about the overarching strategy. There's a bit of a question around, is there going to be a 1-page overview for each strategy? And the answer is absolutely yes. Chris is doing work at the moment with Kathy and her team around sort of how do we engage, how do we really sort of bring to life both the clinical and the health equity strategy. That includes, you know, patients, families involvement, videos, etc. And there will be a 1-pager as well. And actually in the health equity strategy, there was a lovely little sort of diagram, actually. It was a bit like an onion that gave you an overview of all the existing strategies and sort of, you know, with the patient at the heart. So again, I would urge you to go and have a look at those on the public website as well, because it's, I can't remember what page it is now, but it talks about all the enabling strategies and sort of talks a bit around that coat hanger where you have your trust organisational strategy and then you have your supporting strategies underneath. But we will also be doing that sort of engagement work as well, and we'll be making sure there's a 1-pager.
Okay, super. It'd be good to see those to help bring it to life, and not just for COG, but for our staff as well, Stephen. Because strategies can too often be very dense documents that sit gathering dust, and the challenge is to bring this to life. Back to you, Stephen.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Arnie. And then the final question in this section was around, is there going to be a new director of people appointed? And if so, how is it affordable? So what we actually have is a director of inclusion, OD and culture. He joined us on the 1st of December. And in relation to the question of how are we going to afford it, actually, Aid Tams, and the comms went out today, has joined us from the ICB. The ICB clearly are paying for the majority of his role. And basically he is with us for 6 months. While we do some further work around sort of strengthening the people directorate. And as I say, he's got a big challenge in front of him. And also he'll be supporting some of the workforce transformation as well. The ICB is going through significant restructure at the moment. You know, previously we've talked about the changes in the sort of the architecture of ICBs and NHS England, etc. And obviously aid is being part of that. So we've sort of reached out and we've got some resource into CPFT to support what is an incredibly important agenda for us going forwards.
Marvellous. Okay. Oh, sorry, with regard to my cat, he's feeling terribly needy this evening because he's had me being distracted most of the day. Stephen, are we going to take subsequent questions in the committee reports, or do you want to go through them now?
Let's take them in the committee reports, and then we can bring in other exec colleagues as well.
Marvellous. Okay. Any questions at all then for Stephen on what he shared by way of feedback with you? Now, I may have this wrong, but Miriam, I'm looking at you. Are you giving the lead governor update tonight?
I am, yes, indeed,
Brilliant.
stepping in for Andrea. So, yeah, I hope I do a good enough job. Big shoes to fill. So a couple of things. Take the report as read. A couple of things just to flag. So, one of the things we are looking to do is to further evolve the governor's report, because it's kind of one of those reports that you read and you think, well, so what? Because all it is kind of a list of stuff that we've attended in the main. So we're going to make some changes to that to potentially include feedback from visits, areas identified by colleagues for improvement, perhaps summarising some feedback from the forums, etc. We're not looking to duplicate anything, and we know that some of this stuff is already being looked at elsewhere in the trust, but we just feel that we need to have a meatier report that's more about what we do rather than where we've been, if that makes sense. So that's the first thing to say. I just also wanted to pick up on the governor's leadership team that Andrea has put in her paper. So Andrea, Helen, and myself and Claire meet as a leadership team, and we've concluded that what we'd quite like to do over the next year and beyond is to focus our efforts on a small number of things rather than just trying to do everything. We feel that if we were to use the CQC well-led report as our framework, that would probably be a good place to start, because lots of the things that we talk about feed into that. And I think also we just want to feel that we are a valuable part of the trust governance, where I think sometimes we've maybe not kind of felt that. We do feel that we have a role to play. And Eileen, I know that Andrea met with you and Steve earlier to kind of talk about how the current model works and what doesn't work well. And so things like, how do we get assurance when assurance really is the responsibility of the board? There's kind of no real mechanism for us representing the public, which is one of our roles. So we were really pleased at some of the discussions that were had at that meeting around potentially the lead or the leadership governors having a direct relationship with nominated execs that match the forum, so that we could perhaps meet monthly to get a better picture and understanding of what the big issues are, because sometimes I think it feels like where we have the ability to ask a question, we perhaps wouldn't. But if we were to have a relationship with an exec, it feels like that would be more collaborative rather than feeling like we have an adversarial relationship or a challenging relationship, which is what we don't want, because we are actually all on the same side here. So we're really pleased that came out. Those execs are for people and culture would be Stephen, and also Stephen for business and performance, and then Rachel for quality and safety. And I know Martin's going to help us try and set up those meetings with our link execs would be really, really good. So I know Steve's not here, but I did want to say thank you to Steve for supporting that and helping to evolve and develop our role. And we're kind of really pleased that the trust feels that there is a role for us and a meaningful role for us. So that's really great. And thanks to Steve for that. I just then wanted to feedback on a couple of things that came out of the forum meetings recently. So Helen, I've noticed that you're here. Did you want to do a little bit on the People and Culture Forum?
Yeah, sure. No problem. I have my notes right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We had a People and Culture Forum meeting, and I've taken on the lead role for that forum. I found it was I thought a really, really good meeting. I'm sure lots of people in the room were at that meeting, but I thought it was a very useful meeting. We as Miriam has just said, we used the well-led report to look at the big issues. This is a publicly available report around CPFT, and it suggested or highlighted some areas of concern. So we're using this report to use our forums to do a deep dive on one issue at a time. And we chose the freedom to speak up policy at CPFT, where staff are encouraged to highlight any issues that they see, really around anything from bullying to patient safety concerns to anything like that, to highlight those things. We got really good document, a report back that was an internal report for CPFT, which had been presented to their own People and Culture subcommittee. So really, really good document to base our conversation around. So we really just had governors asking specific questions and at times challenging and pushing back on some of the aspects of those reports to get kind of further insight around the issues that have been highlighted in the well-led report. And we focused on 5 areas. Really, a concern one governor had was around how the data from the freedom to speak up process that staff raise is aligned with data that comes through from patients. And we were given a really good reassurance that this is starting to happen now at committee level, that those patient safety committees were speaking with the People and Culture committees where those issues aligned to have the holistic view. Some governors were asking around gaps in the reporting between different members, different groups of staff. So, for example, medical staff raised far fewer issues through this process than other staff, which is, a concern, suggesting perhaps that they're not coming as forthcoming with or feeling as free to raise those points. And the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians said that they have a programme in place specifically to target this, which is excellent to hear. The third item was there were some concerns from the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians themselves, which are these are full-time roles that people have. These guardians around whether people are identifiable from the demographic information on the report and how that might impact on reporting rates. So I felt a really good role for the governors there was that some governors were able to give advice here on how this is handled in other organisations and, not reporting where there's fewer than 10 people in one particular subsection of a demographic, which was helpful. I think that there were 2 final bits. The next one was where there was most challenge, I think, and it was the well-led report had suggested that CPFT had some work to do to ensure that the Freedom to Speak Up process is effective in terms of being able to show staff that changes are being implemented. And there was a lot of focus around one statistic in this report, which is that fewer than 1% of the trust leadership team have actually completed the training, the following up training that would support them in following up with staff when issues were raised. So we had quite a long conversation about that and the competing pressures, of course, that we all have around training and the prioritisation of mandatory training. But there was quite an interesting discussion around that. And then finally, there was quite a philosophical conversation around whether the senior leadership of CPFT felt that an increase in Freedom to Speak Up reports would be seen as a positive or negative sign, and it was really reassuring to hear that an increase in reports would be seen as a positive sign, within reason, of course, but meaning that what the well-led report had suggested, which was that we need CPFT need to really ensure that this mechanism is effective, would be the case if we saw an increased number of reports. So fantastic meeting. We really tried to cram a lot in. We only looked at one document, but we crammed a lot into that one forum. And I would encourage governors to come to the next one because it was really good fun. It was a good meeting.
Thanks, Helen. So then just briefly, some feedback on the Quality, Safety and Patient Engagement Forum. So we had a presentation and a discussion on the culture of care, which is going to be moving from kind of a pilot status to business as usual. I think it was really interesting for us to hear about how for lots of people this is a really new way of working. So, trauma-informed, autism-informed, lived experience, and it's basically a framework that's kind of, it's a co-produced model of care. So very much kind of led by the individual. We heard about some of the outcomes, which provides really good evidence as to the value of this kind of model and framework. I think for me, one of the challenges is going to be, it's not a mandated framework, so that feels like it's a bit optional. But Steve Grange, who was there, informed us that it was absolutely best practice. So I think one of the challenges is going to be, whilst it's not mandated, how do we make it that it's something that all the teams across CPFT want to follow? We've agreed to look at it again because I think one of the things that we need to understand is how this particularly relates to the CQC well-led plan. So we will revisit it in the months ahead. But I thought it was a really good discussion, and it was great to see the passion of Mike Seaman, particularly who presented on it. It clearly has put his heart and soul into it. So that's some feedback from that forum. And I think that's it from me. Eileen, thank you. Unless there's any questions.
That's brilliant, Miriam. Thank you so much. Any questions at all for Miriam? I would just go back to Helen on freedom to speak up, only because it's something I led the development of freedom to speak up policy in the NHS when I was a civil servant. I think nationally, you find freedom to speak up is much less used by doctors than other staff groups. It's regrettable, but and it's not to say they don't raise concerns in other ways and routes, but there is just a national picture that it's not that well used by doctors.
Absolutely, Eileen. Yeah, and was widely acknowledged in the group as well, and it was really helpful to hear that the Guardians were really focusing on that and how they could increase those reporting routes.
But I would assure you that doctors are not shy of speaking up, usually using other routes. Jackie, in you come.
Yeah, I was just picking up on that same point, Eileen, and I was just going to put Stephen LeGood on the hot spot actually. But I think it's also the same reflection in the staff survey in terms of who completes the staff survey and who doesn't.
Yeah, that's correct, Jackie. Yeah, that is correct. And if you look at the completion of our People Pulse survey, which is a quarterly survey, it's reflected through that as well.
But I would stress we are not without feedback of an ongoing nature from our doctors in particular, which is important, and there are other structures in which they do very effectively feed in and very helpfully most often. Miriam, thank you. Stephen, did you want to come back in?
Well, I think you've probably just said what I was going to say. I think, freedom to speak up is one really key area to do that sort of feedback, but we have many other mechanisms across the organisation where staff actually feedback. And I think your point there, Eileen, is that our medical staff, but also other staff as well, will use their line manager, they'll use colleagues, etc. So there are many other mechanisms across the organisation for people to sort of step up and say, look, so we just need to recognise that.
Okay, super. As I said, thank you so much, Miriam. I'm going to move now into the reports from the committees. I'm going to go to you first, Mike, and I know you and Rachel have got a couple of governor questions to respond to as well. So, Mike, to you.
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. My camera has frozen twice during the meeting, so I apologise if that happens again. And perhaps, Rachel, you could cover me. But thank you for the opportunity. You've got my report there, which reports on what we covered at our meeting of the Quality and Safety and Patient Experience Committee back in October the 20th. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I'm just going to draw out one or two points, if I may. The first has already been alluded to, which is we received and approved the health equity strategy and the clinical strategy. And like Stephen and others, I would want to acknowledge the work that Kathy Walsh and Catherine Faulkner and her public health registrars. And also we've got input now into those from a newly established committee, which is going to report to the Quality, Safety and Patient Experience Committee from the Clinical Ethics Advisory Group, which I think is an important addition to the way in which we think about things at CPFT. The two issues to alert you to: we remain concerned about the lack of provision of electroconvulsive therapy in the south of the county. And we also remain concerned about the lack of appropriate provision for psychiatric intensive care for female patients. The other points I'd quite like to draw out, importantly, we heard about the quality and equity impact assessments. As you know, and Steve Cox will probably talk about this, we are going through a cost improvement programme, and there are a lot of projects there which contribute to our cost improvement programme, and we are making sure that all of those programmes are quality and equity impact assessment is undertaken, so that we can do three things really. One is to choose the right programmes to pursue. It's not all about finance. Quality and safety matter, and equity. Two, we can identify any risks associated with those through this process and mitigate those risks in as far as we can. And three, I think it's really important that we're transparent and open about the consequences of our decisions. And this is contributes to that, which I think is very important in terms of trust and public accountability. I won't perhaps pick out anything else unless people have got questions. But the one question that did come our way, are you happy for me to pick that up now, Eileen? Which was a specific reference to the patient and care experience report. That's point 2.18, which was asking, is there any analysis of complaints and themes coming out of complaints? If so, what are the key themes? And do we have any KPIs about timeliness of responding to complaints? So yes, we do analyse the complaints and themes coming out. And I think what I'd say is that the themes vary by directorate. So just to give you a little bit of a feel of the adult directorate, it's not surprising access to services, waiting lists drive quite a lot of the complaints, but also disagreements about diagnosis. Children and young people, access, as we've already heard, there's going to be a national look at ADHD and mental health services, which might include children, but access to those diagnostic services. And interestingly, disagreements around ratifying private diagnoses where patients and families have taken their children to a private clinic for assessment. OPAC was slightly different, and that was more about equipment and OT assessments. In terms of KPIs, the response times are 50 days for complex and 30 days for simple complaints, although I would say that most of the complaints have a degree of complexity to them. And not only are they have that, the numbers of complaints are going up. So in quarter one of this year, we had 90 complaints. In quarter two of last year, we had 61. So that's half as many again. However, despite that, the number of complaints that were closed in September was 44, which was, well, 110% increase on August. And in terms of are we meeting our KPIs, the average response time is 61 days against a KPI of 50. So the answer is no. But I think what I take assurance from is that that response time is coming down despite the increased numbers and the complexity. And I think it's as important to give a full and well thought through response to a complaint, as well as responding to the complaint in a timely manner. And so I'm assured that that is happening. Lastly, the patient safety team and Datix team are continuing to support the directors in terms of reminders, and so we don't just wait until the target's missed. Work goes on to address.
Rachel looks like she's poised to come in to add something to that.
Oh,
Yes. Shall I come in there, Mike? I think
Thank
it might
you
be
very
helpful.
much. Yes, I appreciate that, because I was running out of steam.
No, not at all, not at all. I think it's also worth. It was very good, thank you. But it's really. It's also worth explaining that across the whole system, we have a system-wide quality group that meets on a regular basis with region, and across the whole system, the increase in numbers of complaints in all of the provider trusts has increased over the period that Mike's talked about, post-COVID, basically. What we have done in terms of looking at the whole process mapping for our complaints in terms of, and as Mike described, the sort of the quality control issues, what we've realised within that is that, in fact, very few of our complaints are simple. The majority are complex, and absolutely it's really important that we give them the due consideration in terms of a quality response and not rushing things. Again, one of the conversations within the whole system is that the KPI or the target here of 50 days, that's very old now, and there are discussions afoot in again from a system perspective of that being increased to 60 days, which would make more sense in comparison to what's happening, and we're looking at that currently. And as Mike has described, I think what I would want to stress is, if we consider how busy the NHS is, what we've been talking about earlier, the investigating managers are managers, clinicians, clinical nurse specialists, etc., from within the teams. So they, it's, and I've always said this is not on top of their day job, it's part of. It's really important that we do complaints really well and have that learning and the triangulation with other patient safety incidents, for example. But it is a it's a big chunk of time, resource, capacity. So number one, I'd like to be thanking people for doing them in such a timely way, but also the contribution in terms of the action plans and the learning thereafter. So I think it's really about paying tribute to that we have moved this forward in challenging circumstances when the increased number of complaints have risen.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Rachel. Let me bring in Miriam and then Jane.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Can I just ask whether the 50-day target, or if it's going to be 60, is that like a nationally mandated figure, or is it a trust figure?
No, it's not nationally. It's a trust. It's a local figure.
And do we know how that would relate to others?
Very similar.
Similar. Okay. And then there's a bit of an add-on. So I could imagine that there are some people who have complained who are waiting and waiting and waiting, and for whom 50 to 60 days probably feels like forever, especially if their complaint means that they can't progress something. Do we have a sense of whether people are kind of waiting for a response and staying well, or whether, I don't know, whether the situation that they're complaining about deteriorates even further? And I'm really sorry because I don't actually have any context, but I'm just thinking about what state people are in after the 60 days. Have things got worse?
Well, it depends what the complaint's about. I think what you're referring to, if it's access to services. What we do, obviously, the PALS and complaints team make initial contact once a complaint has been made, and then the investigating manager makes contact very quickly after that. So, and if during that time any additional signposting would be needed, and particularly in terms of waiting well on waiting list, that would be actioned as well.
Okay, thank you.
But what's very important is that the investigating manager does make that connection with the complainant and keeps them informed if there's going to be any delays, as an example, just in terms of managing the complaint process.
Yeah.
It's perhaps worth just putting a little bit of colour on the reason why some take quite a long time as well, Miriam, is of course we work in partnership with others. And
thank you.
Sometimes we have issues that are raised with us where actually the explanation and solution are not in our gift. So we have to go through partners, work together to endeavour to get something that is helpful to the person who's raised a concern in the first place. So it's not necessarily a linear process that we can run just within CPFT. It's sometimes having to go outside the boundaries in quite complex ways.
Thank you.
Jane, and then Sarah.
Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, and I certainly understand the complexity, and I can imagine it's very, very time consuming and so on. I think I have the same query just about the length of time, and just a query about whether a way of addressing not meeting KPIs is to change the KPI.
Fair point.
And I know that when people complain, they're unsatisfied, they're dissatisfied, they're unhappy, and delays just escalate that complaint becomes even more of a complaint, and so a timely response is really important. So I was just wondering about whether anything else has been considered, whether other strategies have been considered to try to get those responses sooner.
Fully take that on board, and that was a lengthy discussion we had at the system quality group in terms of the timeframes. But as I guess to put this quite clearly, we do have finite resource in terms of our PALs and complaints team, but also in terms of the investigating managers who are, who this is part of their role, and maybe actually seeing patients, managing services, etc. I think what I'd also add is that just the increase in the number of complaints, if the SPC charts show it very well, that in fact in adult and specialists, as an example, their complaint numbers have actually doubled in the past year. So if we have that as the context for it, to keep reducing the timeline as well, we need to be putting more resource into complaint management, which will be removing it from frontline services in terms, if that makes sense. So it is a really fine balancing act, but fully take on board what you said. Yeah, I think the important thing is, just as colleagues I was going to around the table, but we're all virtual, will have heard this from me quite a few times. By looking at the process mapping, particularly the quality checking, quality assurance checking of once the investigation has been done and the investigation pack has been submitted and then the letters formulated, we've reduced that. The number of steps was, I think there were about 5 steps. We've reduced that quite dramatically and have put in very clear escalation processes. So as an example, I now meet, unfortunately for the complaints team, with them every Thursday morning at 8:30 to go through any escalations. So we really keep the grip on it, and that's helped enormously. But again, that's an additional pressure on them. But so the process mapping has been really important to reduce.
Okay, and Jane, not by way of excuse, if you're waiting for a response to something on anything, it's deeply frustrating. If it's a health matter, it can be terribly concerning. But across the NHS, complaints have gone up exponentially, as Rachel says, since the period when COVID concluded. Complaints have gone up, and all trusts are struggling to meet local targets. I don't know of one that's got less than 50 days. So I don't think we're in any way an outlier there. It's just the reality that there are a lot of people waiting for services, and culturally, people are also more willing, and it's not a bad thing, to raise concerns around their experience. So we have to work with that in the best way we can. Sarah, in you come, and then we must move on.
Mine was a quick point rather than questions. I hope it's okay and appropriate here. In my role as a county councillor, I sat on the Health Scrutiny Board, and this week we had Karen Barker from the ICB, and I posed the question to her that had been raised, because I was absolutely quite horrified when I found out about the lack of female inpatient beds, and she has promised a follow-up on that and reconfirmed the ICB's commitment to mental health and complex mental health within the new structure, and she said she would sort of bring that up. So I just wanted to sort of raise that here, that as as an outcome of listening to the reports last time, I was concerned and picked that up. So I just thought I'd raise that.
Yeah, well, that's great, Sarah. I mean, to be absolutely clear, we're talking about female intensive care beds. We do have beds for women, I promise you, but it's for those who are most poorly. Nationally, there's a shortage. We're not alone in not having any, but I still think it's a stain on a civilized society that if you are going through the trauma of serious mental illness, there's a good chance you're going to be sent far away from home if you're a woman, and that can't be right. The counter argument is that women apparently experience less serious mental health illnesses, and therefore we have to cut our cloth according to the demand. But that doesn't feel altogether equitable to me. Stephen, do you want to come in, and then I do need to move us on?
Yeah, apologies, Eileen. Just to sort of pick up that point, we had some additional feedback on that conversation at the Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Partnership Board this morning. We spoke very much around setting our priorities next year as a system, as well as CPFT leading and supporting that, working with all our partners. And that's clearly sort of an element that will be feeding into that. But as I said, that'll be much more from a system perspective as well. But so we are picking that up, Sarah, as well. So thank you.
The more we can use our collective voices, the better on such matters. And if you want to pick up on ECT therapies in the south of the county, you'd be very helpful to me there, Sarah, as well. That too is a disgrace. Right, could we move then? Jackie, you're presenting the report tonight from People and Culture Committee. And I think there was just one question for that committee. So over to you, Jackie.
Thank you, Eileen. And I'm going to do this a little bit upside down now from what I had originally written, because I wanted to go back to Helen Keyes, and really helpful and useful to understand and listen around the deep dive that the fora did on freedom to speak up. In Pre's absence, I have made an assumption that the list of 5 priorities or things that you found that were interesting are now feeding their way back in through either an executive or back into the People Committee, because I think it's something that we would be keen to understand and keep an eye on. In terms of the last People and Culture Committee, I'll again, as other colleagues have done, take the report as read, but I just wanted to highlight a few points. It's interesting, the People and Culture Committee. 1 minute you can be dealing with some really minutiae data that we have conversations about sickness and absence and turnover, to next having a really great conversation about an initiative that one of Stephen's team has brought forward. So in terms of monitoring the data, we have our eyes on absence and labour turnover, especially as it's that time of year, as we've just heard from other colleagues, but also as we start moving into the new year and with the new NHS plan, we just need to keep an eye on the well-being of our workforce, and also what that data in terms of absence and labour turnover is telling us, along with the welcoming results of the Next Staff survey. The committee has received, over the last 18 months and 2 years that it's existed, a numerous amount of initiatives. And one of the conversations we were having at the last committee was a little bit about how do we now bring all of those initiatives together, and how do we make sure that those initiatives tell a great workforce story. So when we're out there as NEDs or as governors and executives and line managers, that we do have a narrative so that we can see how the contribution of those initiatives are feeding through as outcomes into the organisation. And we very much welcomed Stephen and Saffron's input into that, and I know that there's a question for Stephen at the end. So we're really at that point now in the committee where we want to make sure all of those initiatives are driving and facing the new strategies that we've talked about. We also welcome the report on action in racism, which you can see in the report, and we were privileged at a private board session last month to have a presentation from the race observatory, and it was also commented at the committee that we need to take the learnings from that and feed it into the work that we're doing in terms of action for racism. And lastly, and I know there's a couple of councillors on the call tonight, we very much welcome the carer leaver covenant, which will be going forward to board for sign off. This is a great initiative, and we need to make sure we've got the right wraparound for managers. And the reason why I say it's great to have the councillors on the call tonight is because you will have probably in those organisations that you represent the same kind of carer, the same kind of levers covenant, where we obviously commit ourselves to look after children coming into the workplace and have become into adults, and are making sure that they have an opportunity for jobs. And we suggested at the committee that we do actually work with local authorities to learn from them what they have done, because they have it down to a finer art now in terms of what their care leaver scheme looks like. So we'll be probably knocking on a few doors. That's all I've got to say about the People and Culture Committee. And I think Stephen was going to talk through the answer to the question, which was really about the shaping our future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I just clarify one thing you said, Jackie, that the board has signed off on being a care leaver covenant signatory. And so we do that knowing that any civilised society's got a duty to support those leaving care where the state's been the parent, but also recognising, acknowledging that when we do offer employment in particular, that sometimes care leavers need additional support. And so we need to be ready, willing and able to do that. So it's something that we take incredibly seriously. Stephen, in you come.
Thanks very much, Eileen, and thank you so much, Jackie, as well. That was incredibly helpful and stepping in at the last moment as well. So there was a question around sort of shaping our future. It was specifically around the cultural dashboard. So cultural dashboard is a piece of work that Saffron, and we've already heard about her earlier on, and her team are currently doing. And what it is a subset basically of our workforce scorecard. So it's just looking at a small number of metrics, things like turnover, things like sort of the pulse survey, which is what we do on a quarterly basis, and it's pulling it into a sort of a scorecard so that we can then sort of play back to the organisation what's the impact of that shaping our future programme. And the shaping our future programme incorporates things like reverse mentoring, incorporates things like our behavioural framework. It talks about some, putting in our ED&I strategy, for example. So it's a broad spectrum of sort of initiatives. And I think it comes a bit back to what Jackie was saying around sort of drawing some of this together. And one of the helpful challenges, I think, was from Karen, actually. It was around about sort of how do you know that you're actually achieving what you're trying to do, and how are you making that change, and how is staff sort of feeling that change? And the cultural dashboard is going some way to do that. And I think we'd be very happy to come to, say, a Council of Governors development session to talk a bit more about the Shaping Our Future programme as we sort of pivot that slightly and as we develop that cultural dashboard.
Thanks, Stephen. Super helpful. Any questions at all before we move on to the Audit and Assurance Committee report from Mark? So, Mark, in you come.
Okay, and thanks, and hello to everyone. This is my, I think, first Council of Governors kind of meeting. I think
feels like you've been with us forever. So Mark has.
I know it has been 2 months, and Brian, chaired the last meeting, and so going forward it will be solely kind of my responsibility. The main things we focused on, we had presentations from internal audit, counter fraud, as well as operational risk and the board assurance framework. Issues coming from audit were generally positive. They saw improvements in the board assurance kind of framework, and the improvements were noted by them. And there was also a high confidence rating on cyber assurance, which again, given the risk of cyber for everyone, including the health service, was kind of a very kind of positive. On the operational risk register, various issues were raised regarding the level of training on risk awareness and also the timeliness of people to complete risk issues. I have had follow-up with Jim Ledbetter, and on the training side, they are discussing with the Associate Director of Leadership, OD and Learning regarding, and there's now a new mandatory learning oversight group forum. So risk training is going to be raised to that forum to see what can be developed in order to address kind of those concerns. And as regards the timeliness and the quality of kind of risk reviews, solutions are being discussed with the Director of Operational Performance and Delivery. So those actions which I highlighted are now being addressed. And so I think which is kind of positive. The other issue which was highlighted within the report is more on the kind of the finance side. I'm sorry, I'm just playing with different machines at the moment, so I'm just going to the previous page. And that was standing financial instructions. This is where the general process is waived, where someone can make a payment which doesn't follow the due process. We gave a partial assurance in that case, not because of the concern that those were not handled appropriately, but more how can we gain comfort that they are complete? How do we know that there are only 5? So I got a meeting scheduled with the new CFO, Roberts, in Friday week, and that's one of the issues which I'll be discussing with him when I meet up with him. So I think on the whole, I think no what I call material issues being raised by audit kind of so far, which I think is positive. And the main issue is, as I said, the timeliness of completion of actions, which is also a concern raised by audit. But I'll be following up with audit before the next meeting to try and get comfort that those things are being addressed. There was one question which came from Mike, which I'll just kind of pull up now, which is there is no means by which governors can scrutinise the audit role as there is no forum for audits. What could be developed to help governors know? What I'm going to do is I'll raise it with Robert when I see him next Friday, and Mike will reach out to you and hopefully come to an agreement of what actually makes sense for you and what can actually add kind of that value, whatever that, whether it's a regular meeting, what exact structure kind of works best. But as soon as I've had that call with Robert, I'll arrange a call with you and Robert to discuss what we could do.
Okay, I was just going to say that when Steve and I were originally working on the number of forums we would have, it was thought that the audit and assurance would dovetail into the business and performance one, and that would be a conduit to operate through. So you might just want to work that through with Robert and other colleagues, just to make sure that we use people's time in the best possible way. But it was thought about at the inception, and it was thought possible to dovetail it, Mark. So if you could just have a little think about that. Steve, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on that point, Eileen, I've been in touch with Claire and Mike on the Finance and Strategy Forum. We're hoping, I think, to get together before Christmas to plan the next meeting. So, Mark, if I include you in that, then we can wrap in that audit role as well.
Yeah, no, happy to.
Super. Claire, did you want to come in?
Yes, I do, please, very briefly. I lost contact at the end of Miriam's summing up on the lead governor report, so I didn't get a chance to say anything about the forum on the business and finance strategy forum. So I'll speak about that a little bit later on when we come to that come to the business report. But I wanted just to come back on what Steve was saying then. Thanks.
I think, Claire, we are just about there. So do you want to give your input now, and then I'll pass over to Steve to give his?
Yes, so we've had one meeting of the business and strategy forum, and we decided that we're going to concentrate on looking at strategic issues rather than the detail, the finance detail. Mike will want to come in on that. I think I know Mike had a couple of questions at our first forum, but we want to take an overview of the way that the Trust is dealing with the strategic challenges it has, and to be at each meeting, at each forum meeting, to then look more in detail in the future at one particular area of strategic challenge, strategic discussion. And I think we're going to have a planning meeting about the next forum soon. And I think when we come to, I've got some questions actually in relation to the next paper, and that will sort of flesh out our thinking on strategic challenges and how the Trust is going to manage them as we move ahead. Thanks.
That's super helpful, Claire. Thank you so much. Could we then segue, Steve, to you, if that's all right?
Yeah, no problem.
You've got some questions to pick up also.
Yeah, thank you. I think Stephen's going to help me with one or two of those when we get to them. Yeah, you've got the report, which is the report that went to the last Business and Performance Committee, which was like with Mike's report, was October. I'll just pick out a couple of the key points that we alerted the board to at the meeting last week. The first is around finance, and I should add that the public board received a month 7 update, which was obviously had rolled forward from the BNP month 6 update in October. So there is a slight difference in what you've got in the paper. But the position is broadly similar. There's a forecast to break even at the end of the year, albeit with some heavy reliance on non-recurrent savings. The cost improvement programme is obviously taking a lot of attention, rightly, for BNP. The current position is that there's 9.7 million that's been identified as the point of month 7, and that's split roughly 50-50 non-recurrent and recurrent. The forecast position for the end of the year is to achieve 17.6 million of cost improvement savings, and of that, just over 12, nearly 13 million will be non-recurrent or should be non-recurrent. And I think that the challenge that we know is considerable for the organisation, and a lot of really good work is going on. But at BNP, we're concerned to be assured, as you would expect, that the non-recurrent savings are going to be achieved by year end. So we're taking some time to look at that and to really test and challenge and hopefully be assured that we're going to get to that point. We'll be seeing an update at the BNP meeting next week, and we'll delve into a bit more detail at that point. But I know that the project planning work that the teams are doing, looking at how that non-recurrent gap will be filled, is progressing really well, and hopefully that will be reported. I'm sure it will be next week. So we'll see how that looks. I think the other important, and I know Robert isn't with us, Robert Toole isn't with us today, but he's made a really important point at public board last week about the run rates. So we were looking at savings to be achieved, but actually what's the run rate looking like month on month? And I know he's delving into that as we would expect him to do. So he's going to be giving his attention to that. And at the last BNP meeting in October, we gave a limited assurance on the likelihood of achieving the non-current savings by the end of the year. I think things have moved on by all accounts since then, and we'll see further next week. Hopefully we'll be able to give a higher assurance rating when we see the report that comes. So very much work in progress, some good work going on, but some concern, of course, that we're keeping a close track of through the Business and Performance Committee. The other two areas just wanted to flag from the report. The Green Plan actually is, I think, really important to note and to celebrate the refresh of it that has been submitted into NHSE. 80% reduction in emissions is being planned, and a green plan delivery board has been set up to report progress and monitor progress on that. And there's been really positive engagement and input from staff and feedback. So I think that's important just to register that. And the other area, which I think is the subject of one of the questions as well, is around the digital maturity position. We heard at the BNP in October that we're in the lowest 20% nationally on that. And I know there's some questions. I'll perhaps just cover that off now, Stephen, and perhaps you'll chip in if there's anything I've missed. So it's a self-assessment essentially. So we've been, I think, fairly thorough in what we've done. There are some very positive areas that come through that technical assessment, that self-assessment, the technical infrastructure that we have, and the security and privacy of hardware was another very positive area. But some areas to work on around patient interface, the digital literacy of our workforce, further work in that area. And we've seen at BNP some good progress on a digital strategy that will be coming through next year, and also the appointment of a chief information officer as well. So I think the question was a really helpful question. Stephen may want to add to some of those points that I've made in response to it. But I think that's all I was going to say by way of running through the report, Eileen. So happy to pick up any questions, and obviously the questions that have been asked as well. Happy to pick those up now if that's helpful.
Okay. So, I mean, just to stress, those of you who were at Public Board will have heard us much exercised about money. The NHS is much exercised about money at the present. We are doing absolutely everything we can to achieve a break-even position because we've got a statutory duty to do so. It's as simple as that. It's going to be hard, but actually the harder work is for next year, when we'll have an efficiency saving on top of whatever we will have achieved this year, and we're going to have to make some very significant changes to just our operating model, which are timely, don't get me wrong, but we're going to have to do a lot of work on getting the money to work and getting services to work ever better for patients. So those resources are going to have to be used to very, very best effect. But Stephen, is there anything that you want to add?
So I think, Eileen, there are a couple of questions just to pick up, but just sort of adding to what Steve's just said around digital maturity. I mean, I think the organisation recognises that, it's got more work to do there. I think the digital strategy is really quite key, the engagement across the organisation, but the system, as an organisation, we host the shared care record for the system, which is a really excellent piece of work. So we've got great examples of innovation around the digital agenda, but we also recognise there's more work to do. And I think the appointment of the CCIO, clinical safety officer, we've got a CNIO already in post, is going to sort of really give us the strength to move this agenda forwards.
Okay, can we not talk so much in acronyms? So the CCIO is?
So that is the Chief Clinical Information Officer.
Excellent.
And then the clinical safety officer and the chief nursing information officer as well.
So all of these intended to make us deliver better care, more informed care, and better outcomes for people. And given that digital first is one of the key principles of the NHS plan, we've got to get better at this, haven't we? So, which, given that we sit in this great city of Cambridge with so much tech investment in it, I think it's incumbent on us to do ever better here. Stephen, there was a question on the joint venture for the Children's Hospital, I think, which came forward. I don't know whether you or Steve want to pick that up.
I'm very happy to pick that up, Steve. That's okay. Or do you want to as lead? Or
well, I'm happy to kick off on it, Stephen. So the question is whether the joint venture that we're looking to agree next year is within the remit of governance to sign off as a financial commitment. We don't think it will be. We don't think it will reach the threshold that requires it to be signed off by governors. Obviously, we'll keep that under review. But having said that, I think it's really important that we do fully engage governors in what we're signing up to. If we get to that point, I'm sure we will with the JV. So I think we'll look to engage and brief, maybe through the forum or separately, on what the JV is about and what it's committing the CPFT to, and also perhaps just extending that the full business case for the Children's Hospital is something that will be coming to the board in the autumn, early autumn next year is the plan. So I think equally we'd want to make governors aware of the key elements of that before we get to that point. So taking those two things together, I think there's more for us to talk to you about, either through the forum or separately on the progress with the Children's Hospital next year.
It strikes me the Children's Hospital and the arrangements for running are probably better suited to a joint development session, because I think it'd be really important for all governors to have the chance to hear about it, to hear about the model, and to hear about some of the trickinesses that are involved in getting to that model as we partner with our friends and colleagues at CUH and at the University of Cambridge to make sure that we can bring this to life, but that nothing gets lost in translation about the way in which services are going to be delivered to best effect, and balancing physical and mental health, as is the unique proposition here. Stephen, other questions, I think, are there's business development update, really hard to get a handle on all the strategies, how they're coming together. I think you talked to that a little bit at the outset.
Yeah, I have. And I think what we did in this business development update was just give a very small paragraph on that. But as I said before, I think there's an opportunity to do some more work around with the governors around single pages, to talk a bit more around the coat hanger, which is the overarching strategy, and then actually all the supporting strategies. And obviously, as we said earlier on, we'll be doing sort of single page sort of updates, that sort of thing, but also not just around sort of, you know, communicating that way. We're going to be doing some things with some videos and other sort of engagement through social media as well, to make sure that we can get a broad understanding of the strategy, but also the structures and how that works as well, and the architecture around our strategies.
Okay, let me just bring in Claire.
I just wanted to say I would welcome that, because one of the comments I was going to make on the papers now, and you've already dealt with it, was to say let's understand more clearly how all the different strategies, I mean, the word is mentioned across all the papers we've heard tonight, how all the different strategies are coming together and who's managing the overall strategic direction, how that's being managed and taken forward. I think it'd be really helpful to have regular updates on that. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Claire. Thank you. It's something the board, we have strategies spinning around in our heads. So you're asking for the same sorts of things that collectively non-execs in particular are keen to see. So then final question on this one, Stephen, is about the aspiration and timescale for this thing currently called Advanced Foundation Trust Status, about the criteria and the steps to achieving it, and a suggestion of having a joint development session on this at some point in the new year. So over to you on that one.
Lovely, thanks very much, Eileen. And just sort of linking the two, I think a development session on the Advanced Foundation Trust status would be really good. And obviously we did a development session on the trust strategy and supporting strategies recently. So I think you're absolutely right, Claire. Let's sort of plug those in as well going forwards. So Advanced Foundation Trust Strategy, it was in the 10-year plan. We've had some initial draft guidance. Now that guidance came out on, I think it was around about the 15th of November, and that guidance is currently out for consultation. It closes something around about the 11th of January. So we as an organisation will obviously be feeding into that consultation. At the moment, it talks very much around sort of what is the eligibility criteria, and it talks about, you know, you've got to be at a NOFT segmentation of 1 or 2. And I know we've spoken here previously and at board around sort of the National Oversight Framework segmentation. It was released for the first quarter. We're literally just hearing around the second quarter. So you've got to be a 1 or 2, and obviously in there there's 3, 4, there's a sort of some sort of a 5 in there as well. High quality care, you've got to be good or outstanding in relation to your CQC commission at well-led assessment, and actually no site or service can be rated inadequate. Which I think is really important, because I think in some of the commentary and communication that goes out around this, people have missed that last sort of element off. Just remember, this is all open to consultation. So we will be able to comment on that, because if you think around the CQC well-led assessments, the time frame between assessments could be anywhere between 2, 3, 4 years currently. Now that may change, but that is the sort of the current time frame. Therefore, as an organisation, you may be absolutely motoring ahead on the work you're doing around well-led, but actually you still may be in requires improvement. For example, do you want to be waiting for 2 years or 3 years, etc.? So I think there's going to be a lot of feedback on that element of the criteria. And then leadership, that's the third element, and that talks about that sort of that board assurance work, that sort of provider capability work that we've been doing. And again, scoring around that, you cannot be anything below amber green across that. So again, that's a piece of work that the board has just gone through. I mean, I think the other, just really quickly, the other elements that are really important is we are a foundation trust. We've got a number of organisations nationally that are NHS trusts. Both types of organisations can go forward with this. We've got 8 current sort of pilot sites that are just starting to go through this process using the current guidance, but recognising that's out for sort of consultation. And basically, you don't have to be re-accredited. So at the moment, once you become a foundation trust, currently you are a foundation trust. What they're saying is potentially that they would look to re-accredit you every sort of 5 or 6 years thereabouts. So I think this is very much an evolving picture. I think we've got an opportunity as a foundation trust to comment on that, and certainly we will. And I do think a sort of a governance session will be really, really important. And then my final point is that at the heart of this is about empowering organisations, in empowering their population where they live to really to be able to sort of shape their healthcare and also sort of a social care. And they talk about something like integrated health organisations. And again, we're still only beginning to understand what does that mean as well. So again, I think we just need to plug that into a sort of developmental session, and quality and safety is at the heart of that as well. So as you drive your financial stability, etc., and your longer term plan, that cannot be at the expense of quality, safety, which very much has to be at the centre of what we're trying to do in the Advanced Foundation Trust development programme. I'm going to stop there, Arlie.
Okay, so nothing in concrete yet. There's going to be lots and lots of feedback from trusts because trusts that have gone through, well, Secretary of State has given himself a slight problem because he has gone on record as saying you can't trust CQC ratings. So that's a little bit of a problem. The second thing is that I think it would be, we are not going to be one of the first trusts through the door. So we're going to take the opportunity to find the right time. We need to get to NOF2, and that's what we are completely and utterly focused on. Not because we're chasing the number, but because actually that's doing right by the people we serve. And so we will go through the gate when we feel ready to do so, and not before, unless somebody tells us and twists our arm and says we must. But I think it's all about doing things at the right time, in the right way, for the right reasons, and that's what we will be absolutely determined to do. But any questions for Stephen at all before I move on to Jackie for the final of the reports, which is on the head to toe charity? In which case, Jackie, last but by no means least, and I think there was just one question for you from governors.
Thank you, Eileen. So it's always a great day when you can chair the charity committee, supported by Hannah, our head of charity, who I believe spent some time with some of the governors a couple of weeks ago, sharing the charity objectives and some of the activities and projects and initiatives that her and her team are working on behalf of both patients, carers and staff. So I'll take the report as read. The charity actually had a really great last meeting. We had been discussing for about a year how to stabilise our financial position. And it was great to hear from Kish, our outgoing Chief Financial Officer, that he gave us a thumbs up that we were now starting to stabilise that position. You'll notice in the report that we've actually exceeded our target for this coming year in terms of pledges and commitments that are still to come in. So that was really encouraging. Hannah, through some funding or grant funding, rebranded the charity. And that's not just putting a logo, as you can see on some people's back screens tonight. It meant that we actually were tying more closely to CPFT, and she continues to want to do so, and she's very curious about the strategies that are being developed that we've heard about tonight to ensure that the charity can support some of those priorities where the charity does its good works. We also, and it's part of the questions actually, are forging relationships with the Children's Hospital. These are early relationships that we're building, but we have now got a seat at the campaign board, which is chaired by Mary Archer, and that board has an approach. It's it's in the title really. They are a campaign board. CPFT charity raises money in different ways. So we will be learning probably a little bit about campaign management as opposed to looking for funding and chasing grants. So it will be a really interesting time for us as a charity. But just to answer the question that came in, Hannah has given a few hints and tips for me here. As I say, it's early days, but we have, Hannah has great links into the ACT team, and they meet on a regular basis. There is now, I saw a picture of it the other day, there are porta cabins now on part of the site where the hospital is to be built, and there's some hoardings that have gone up, and we have been part of bringing that to life with flowers and just making it kind of a place where people can go and see what's happening. We are an active member of that fundraising team now, and Hannah is also part of that. And we're now starting to develop areas where we can do some joint work. Mainly, one of the projects is better access for mental health services across the region, and that we're doing that joint piece of work with ACT. And we can tell you more as that progresses over the time period. And it links into the comments that Steve Cox was making, as well as the chair of the Children's Hospital Committee that we have internally to CPFT. Charity items will also be presented to that committee. So we're joining the charity committee to the other committee to make sure that information flows between the two. On my last note is Hannah creates her own charity advent calendar, really, of festive activities that people may want to get involved in. And although we're in day 4 of Advent, I think the first event actually starts tomorrow at the Cavell Centre. So I'm more than happy to share that activity calendar with governors if you would like to drop into any of those activities through December. Hannah and her team, along with some of our partners from Heart and Soul and some schools that come and help sing carols, it's really good to just pop in and participate. If you have the time, you will be very welcome indeed.
Thanks so much, Jackie. There is an impressive list of things, and Martin, maybe that list could be shared with the weekly note that goes out tomorrow so that governors have got full sight of it, if that would be okay.
Yep, we can sort that, yes.
Marvellous. Any questions at all for Jackie? I mean, I would commend Jackie and Hannah for the work they're doing around really getting the charity onto much surer footing than it was even a couple of years ago. If you go around our sites, you will find the impact of what is a really small charity. Almost everywhere you go, they will say, we got this from head to toe, or they did this for us, or they're supporting that. So it really is touching the lives of our staff and touching the lives of those we serve in all manner of ways. And it's something we should be really proud of and lean in to support, and encourage you to buy raffle tickets and all sorts of things as a way to help make a small but meaningful contribution to something that matters so much to all of us. We've gone through the agenda. I am looking at governors to see if there's anything that has not been said that you would like to be said before we draw to a close this evening. Hopefully managing to do so before others have had to leave, because I know you're all busy people. So let me end by saying an enormous thank you to you for giving your time, for all the effort that you're making. It's great to hear now the reports from the various fora that are running. And those are only going to strengthen and deepen over time as we get used to working in this way together. So big thank you for that. And for those of you who I won't see before we get closer to the end of the Advent period, let me wish you a very happy and stress-free Christmas, if that's possible. Yeah, thank you for all you've done this year, and look forward to all the fun and joy that we will have next year, because every year is a delight in terms of health, it must be said. Syra, thank you for organising this evening, and Martin, thank you so much for all you do to make it happen too. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon. Bye now.